Hello, everyone. This is Graeme Park. Welcome to another Creative Futures session where I talk to a variety of creatives from across the creative sector. Today, we've got Jonny Davenport. He's the artistic director of several venues, including the Old Courts in Wigan, the Royal Court Theatre in Wigan, Wigan Pier, and the Square Chapel Arts Centre in Halifax. Jonny, thank you very much for joining us.
Morning. Thank you very much for the invite.
No, listen, thank you for agreeing to talk to our students. Before we talk about your wonderful venues, and as we'll find out, I'm slightly biased when I say that. And before we talk about what you do, tell us a bit about the young Jonny Davenport. When did you realise you wanted to work in the arts? Was it a plan or was it something that happened? Tell us about your background, first of all, please.
Yeah, sure. So, a little bit about myself, really. I am 38, married, three daughters, Wiganer, Evertonian, into music. Pretty standard person, really. But my backstory is I've been a drummer since I was 10, and really started off in high school. I carried on the lesson. You were given a free lesson in high school, and the music teacher said, you can get a free half-hour lesson. The school paid for it, free half-hour lesson every week. So I was like, oh, right, okay. She said, you can do anything but drums because we don't have a drum kit. So sort of being difficult and being 11, I dug my heels in. Did the teacher, we got a drum kit. So that was probably my first notable, determined episode with creativity. Just really enjoyed it, and then got into a sort of mid-teens. I was in a band with friends, got a bit serious about it, and when I was probably 19, we were offered an indie deal with a label, and then as many as happens for many people, didn't work out. We were potentially talented enough, but we definitely weren't professional enough. We thought that people just come and knock on your studio door and give you all the opportunities that you need. So big steep learning curve. But that desire to be involved in the creative sector never went away. Still hasn't gone away, obviously. But it's just diversified, really. So myself and my wife Becky, we had basically a program of events that we used to put on in and around the northwest using other people's venues. So we used to put on gigs, charity dues, fashion events. We used to be jewellery designers, and we used to make jewellery for loads of music videos. Then we partnered up with stylists, and we did things like X Factor live shows and these types of things. So from being a drummer to making jewellery to putting on events, all of these things really fed into my desire to do things culturally. Now, I didn't know what things were. It was always going to be about putting on events, engaging people, and really giving attention to the detail of what makes a good event, what makes a good experience for performers, for artists, for audience, for the venue. So I suppose I actually fell into the role of a producer without actually realizing what that was. So went from sort of musician, artist, producer, and quickly realized that there's so much more to the creative industry than just being the performer, being the star of the show. So I sort of saw what the potential was then, and realized that I can make a career out of this. So back in, it was about 2007, the rehearsal studios where my band were based, we were told that they were closing down because Paul O'Neill, the engineer who actually owned them, Paul basically had a lot of work doing front of house. He's worked with M people, these types of people, and that was an opportunity really for me to make a commitment to myself, make a commitment to the industry. So we took over those rehearsal studios and recording studio, ran those, I would say successfully, but that doesn't mean without stress. Ran those for a number of years, but we always had this desire to have our own premises where we could put on larger scale public events.
So basically, you were never tempted when the band thing never worked out. You never tempted to go, oh well, this hasn't worked out. I'm going to go and find a job, along with your wife, who was also a creative person. It was a case of no, we want to do something. So tell us about how you got the venues then, because they're all very. I mean, we'll come to Square Chapel later because there's a good story with that one. But tell us about how you started off and how you got your first venue.
So off the back of knowing sort of how to curate a space for various different events, we knew we wanted, a certain size of space, and there's a pub. If anybody knows Wigan, right next to Wigan North Western Station, there's quite a locally well-known pub. Used to be called the Vic. That was up for sale, so we went looking round and envisaged that was the perfect place for us. Said to the estate agent, is there any other interest in it? And he was like, no, not at all. So this particular weekend, we were told it was going to complete on the following Monday. We were so excited, programming work and planning what the launch would be like. And then we actually got gazumped on the building by the estate agent. So we were devastated and thought, it's not going to happen. Were we being unrealistic? Is everything against us? And then we thought, no, actually, it's just, if it's meant to be, it'll happen. So then we were made aware of the old courts building, which was literally about 20 times the size of the building, which was the ideal size. And it was just one of those moments, really, go for it or, miss the opportunity. So
did you, hang on, sorry for interrupting, did you find out why the estate agent had gazumped you?
Yeah, so I think it was the first time he'd been in the building while it was being available, and he subsequently turned it into flats.
Oh, I see. Right, okay.
Franchise, shopping downstairs. So I think just walking around the building was thought about by our interest,
He just thought he could make more money by getting hold of it himself. Okay, but as you said,
probably right.
Yeah, probably. But I suppose in the grand scheme of things, it kind of worked out well for you because, well, tell us about the old court story.
So the old courts building, it's actually known officially as Gerard Winstanley House. So it is the old court buildings in Wigan Town Centre, built in the late 1800s. It was, it's got several actual court spaces in it, but it was used later, sort of into the 80s and 90s, as the council's offices for, it's like the MP's office, victim support, all of these types of functions were based here. But then the council moved out some years ago into a newfangled, more modern, all singing, all dancing building. And this building was just left empty. So I've actually paid and displayed I'm in the old courts building now.
Oh, right.
Paid and displayed on the front road many times over years and actually never just looked up at the building. But when you look up at it, it's a spectacular building. There's gargoyles on it, loads of character to it. So we took on the building and sort of thought, right, okay, we've got so much more space than we needed. So maybe there's an opportunity now that's been sort of presented itself to us to do a lot more than music or, one event per week. We can really go full tilt with this. So to simplify it, we engaged a lot of people who we knew were already practicing artists, talented musicians, consulted lots of interesting people for advice. One being Dave Halliwell, a friend of mine who used to manage the Verve. He initially said, you're crazy, but you're doing it, so try X, Y, and Z. Maybe speak to this person. Have you considered this? And that's what we've done. We've sort of gone cap in hand for advice to people who we respect, and that's something we still do. You're always learning. You can always get things wrong. So we just, at the beginning, we really learned on the fly.
But it must have been quite daunting because geographically, where Wigan is, you're kind of equidistant between Manchester and Liverpool, and you're not that far from Warrington either. So, there's a lot of kind of competition, and your area, you've got people who would probably be happy to go to any of those three cities that I mentioned. I mean, so tell us about how daunting it was and how you coped with that.
you're dead right, and people do that. So on one hand, we thought, okay, so great transport links. There's two stations in Wigan. We've got a new bus terminal, and then we were thinking, is this crazy that there's so much choice within, by any means of travel, 20 minutes, half an hour. There is so much choice. So then we had to really look at Wigan as a town and the people of Wigan. And we chatted to people. Wigan has obviously got, like any town, it's got its own cultural history. Some towns have like stronger identities for certain things than others, but Wigan with its northern soul, with its sport as well,
Hmm.
and then with the pier. So we thought there's actually a lot of things that are unique to Wigan, and we need to tap into them, but not exploit them. And we also need to make sure that we're not just selling what Wigan's got to people who aren't from Wigan. We need to sell what Wigan's got to the people who already live here and make them excited about it, make them proud of it. So that's what we're in the process of doing. Really, somebody I won't ever say who it is, but somebody local, I had a conversation with them right at the start, and they said about culture, and they said, you know, you're off to a loser. Really, Wigan hasn't got any culture. It's only really got Wigan Pier, the Verve, Northern Soul. I thought, well, for a town of 300,000 or 400,000 people, there's quite a few significant things have gone on. Certainly in the last 50 to 80 years. So if that's the starting point, I'm really happy with that. So we just thought, we've got to change perceptions. We've got to make people realise that I go to Manchester for all manner of shows. I go to Liverpool, go to Warrington, to Preston, London, Edinburgh, wherever, like everybody does, and like you should, spread the love and see what the UK's got to offer. But, be proud of where you're from, and opportunities come.
Well, it sounds to me, well, two things. You sound very positive, right? Which is a good trait in this current situation, and you like a challenge. Now there are two venues that have presented a challenge because um, the Square Chapel Centre in Halifax, which is a place I've performed in myself, um, after the pandemic hit and the lockdown, it went under, and you came along, stepped in, and took it over. And also, the Royal Courts Theatre in Wigan has been shut, closed for many years. And again, during the pandemic, you've decided to get involved in that and try and make it a going concern again. So with the backdrop of the pandemic, what made you take these two venues on?
I think we are very, very optimistic people. We're very positive. But the fact of it is that isn't anywhere near enough. You've got to be you've got to be realistic with these things. Those are two really big things that we're doing, really big things that we're taking on. And essentially, we're exposing ourselves out of our comfort zone of something that, with the old courts, albeit there's so much more progress we want to make, but we're making that progress. So it would have been quite easy to just stick with the old courts. But, we looked at the opportunities, like with Square Chapel, for example. We looked at what Square Chapel means to people in Halifax, what it means to people like yourself, Graham, who I've literally got only really positive experiences, great things to say about it. And we didn't get sort of carried away in like the romance of, oh, let's go over to Halifax. We thought, okay, let's actually pick this apart, and we look at the potential for, can we increase visitor numbers? Do people want this in Halifax? And all of these things that we asked, the overwhelming response was, this is the right thing to do. People in Halifax love it. People in Halifax are actually really proud of it, and they were devastated when when it went into the situation that it did. So taking all of this into consideration, and then thinking, what can we do as a group of people who think in a certain way and operate in a certain way? Can we add enough value to that it's worth us getting involved in? And the answer again, was absolutely yes. So you know there's nothing guaranteed. There's, in any sector, but especially in our sector, there's nothing guaranteed. But we've got a few sort of tried and tested methods on how we do everything from big decisions on buying the Royal Court Theatre to small decisions on who we program and when we program them, and we keep evolving those processes and just keep on top of the numbers, keep on top of our perception of what we're doing, how people feel about us.
Do you see similarities between Halifax and Wigan? Because would you plan to do similar things at Square Chapel and at Old Courts? And also going back to the competition thing, Square Chapel is pretty much like millimeters from the Peace Hall, which is a massive art centre, which is direct local competition, or is it?
Yeah. Well, we actually, as you know, we were joined on to the Peace Hall, so
Exactly.
it's a stone's throw. But what we do is, I think it's down to how you interpret other people who are doing similar things or things elsewhere in your sector. For me, if you look at just Halifax as one example, if we set out to be the only place that did theatre, the only place that did live music, the only place that people went for a coffee, the only place that people went to express themselves, it's impossible. And why would you try and monopolise anything? We look at everyone else who's doing anything in any of the areas where we've got an interest, and we just think, wow, along with us, hopefully, they are making that place a viable destination for people who want to go to enjoy whatever it is that they want to enjoy. So it's horrible having enemies. So and it's great having a great network of people and collaborators who've got some similar interests. So our way of working is we engage as many people as we can and just have a genuine conversation with people over a pint or over a brew or over Zoom, and just ask them questions, be friendly, be kind to people, tell them about what your plans are. And more often than not, we find that really meshes with people's plans. And there's inevitably going to be some areas where something that we were planning somebody's already doing or they were planning on doing. But if you've got respect for people and you keep in dialogue, you can always find a harmonious route. And then that makes Halifax more appetizing for people. Look at the likes of Edinburgh Fringe, for example. Look how sort of how stacked that market is for all the different things going on. But I think that probably people might listen to this and think, well, it's uber competitive, but it is. But there's so much going on that punters go.
What I got from that was you mentioned a word that I mention all the time to all of my students, and that's collaboration, right? Which I think is an important thing there. But it sounds to me like you are concentrating very much on your own game, but being aware of what everyone else is doing. So rather than see it as competition, like you say, it's a healthy background to be part of.
Yeah, it's got to be like that, because you could put a massive amount of resource and time and a massive amount of yourself into a project, launch it, and then go, oh, it already happens. Somebody's already doing it. Somebody's already doing a better job of it, or somebody's tried it and it wasn't successful because of these various reasons. And like with anything in life, if you don't know, if you have blinkers on, you're not aware of what's going on around you. And we do that with everything we do. And it you know what, it actually makes your job more interesting, because we can chat to all of these different fascinating people who've got things in common with us, and it doesn't feel like a job at times, because chatting like this, for example, this is incredibly useful to me, but this is chatting to you about our industry, about possibilities and how we make things work. And if you live and breathe culture, then you don't feel like you're at work. Certain elements of it, I think we've chatted about this before, Graeme, about the things that sometimes people put to the back of the to-do list, but
Yes.
because it's things people don't particularly like doing, and in that it's generally summarized as admin. You've got to do certain things to do any type of job. With us,
Well,
it's
well, no. Sorry to interrupt, but
honest.
It sounds to me, I mean, you're a great person. We'll talk specifically about your plans in a minute, but it sounds like you've got a bit of business acumen. You must have business acumen to take on a huge venue and then expand to other venues while they're all shut. There's a pandemic on. What advice? I think you were about to do that anyway. What advice would you give to students about the behind the scenes stuff that's before you even
Yeah.
do the creative stuff?
Dead simple. Value it. Don't pretend that being strategic about your career or your venue or your business or your show or your tour. Don't pretend that the strategy isn't important, because there's a million different tasks that go into running an arts centre or setting up an arts centre, or booking a tour, a European tour for a DJ, or developing a show, getting a show onto a stage, building up relationships with venues. So all of the things that aren't the reasons you came into this sector, they've still got to be done. The analogy I would use is, everybody loves going on holiday, but nobody really enjoys queuing up at the airport or going through passport control. But nobody turns up at Manchester Airport without the passport because they can't be bothered queuing. So, you've got to do the donkey work sometimes. You've got to do the boring stuff, but tackle it head on. Get better at doing it, so it doesn't become something that on a Sunday night you think, oh, I need to do that tax return, or I need to reply to these emails because somebody's chasing me for information.
Yeah.
Everybody has suffered from that at some point. And then ultimately, all you do, if you don't get that in order, your creativity starts to take a little bit of a knock, because you'll get anxious, you get stressed, you get a stack of things that you need to do that you can't be bothered doing or you've been putting off. And I always just think, do that first. Get the boring bit, the necessary evils done, and then you can be creative. So I think my advice would just be, be savvy. It's not all about just being creative. You've got to do everything that wraps around that to enable you to be creative.
Okay, so let's talk about the elephant in the room, the pandemic. All the venues, well, so theatres, nightclubs, cinemas, and you cover a variety of different events. So everywhere is shut, and the government haven't really had what we call the creative sector or the nighttime economy as a priority for getting back to normal. What have you learned from the past 12 months? It's almost 12 months. And what are you going to do? What have you learned that you can apply to your venues about coming back later this year, hopefully?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that we've learned is how resilient we are, and that's not just me, the other directors. That's every member of staff. That's the artists that we've engaged, and it's our audience as well, who've embraced the fact that we've taken temporarily everything we do. All of our creative output at the moment is online. Absolutely nothing wrong with that, because there's some arts organisations who are just online and they function amazingly well and they do amazing things, and we are in a digital age. But for us, that isn't how we function. So we've gone from being quite adept at having these in-person events to all of a sudden having to get ourselves skilled up in double quick time on online platforms and stuff. So that takes a bit of getting used to. But what we've learned is, we didn't have those skills, but we needed to engage our audience. We needed to provide work for artists. So we've just diversified, and that's true as well with some of the community response that we've done. We set up a phone line to take welfare calls for people in our borough who got in touch with the council, delivered food parcels in collaboration with a local food charity and stuff. So I think there's always a priority, isn't there? So if we didn't have the pandemic, we would probably be, we'd be mid-season for, where are we now, in February? So we'd have January, February, March. We'd be middle of our first season for this year. We'd have artists in the building, in residence. We'd have people in the building, workshops going on. But we can't do that. So that energy just has to be focused on something that is a priority at the moment. But you never know what is around the corner in this sector especially. So long after COVID hopefully is gone, when social distancing isn't the norm, that's not to say that we won't have something else we've got to figure out. I think when if you're an artist forging a career, if you're in a theatre group, if you're running an arts centre, whatever it is you're doing, you've always got an element of problem solving, and just dealing with that in a composed way is really important. So yeah, we've learned that we're resilient, and we've learned that how crazy has this last year been, but we're still here. So we can
When
cope.
well, when you see how much the creative sector is worth to the UK economy, why do you think this government hasn't made it a priority? Why doesn't it not seem to care as much about other sectors?
It's a tough question, that, isn't it? But I think I think too many people still see arts and culture as hobbies and what you do in your leisure time. And that's true for lots of people. Lots of people, that is the hobby. They'll listen to records on a Sunday when if they're cooking a Sunday dinner, or they'll go crate digging at Piccadilly Records in Manchester because they love that. But then that doesn't sum up what music is to you, Graeme, for example.
Mm.
And I think that people need to realise, and people need to promote the fact that it's in the fabric of a lot of people, huge numbers of people. Cultural activity is what they do. It's not just the only thing they can do, it's the only thing they can do really well. But aside from that, it's easy to monetize our sector in terms of what it's the value to the UK economy. So for me, it's about taking it as serious as we take non-cultural sectors that deliver whatever to the economy. So just taking it seriously. But I think the only way that it's a slow burning process, but the only way that can happen is by us in this sector taking ourselves seriously, and that comes back again to up and coming artists getting everything in order, so that you don't just present yourself as somebody who wants to be famous or somebody who wants to be successful. What does that mean? What are the mechanics of actually forging a career? Take yourself seriously. Think about sustainability for your own career, and then you presenting yourself as a viable professional. And I hate to ever think really of what we do in our sector as a commodity, but it's quite useful in some ways to think of your practice as a commodity. You don't get people manufacturing, inventing something and manufacturing it and then just assuming that people will buy it. How do you distribute it? How do you sell the idea of it? And to a degree, that's what we do with cultural activity. Think about how we get that out there to people.
And how important is technology, and in particular social media, in doing that, in selling your commodity?
I'd be kidding myself if I said it wasn't an intrinsic part of what most people do these days, um, because it just is. You know, there are a lot of cultural organisations who are going cashless. A huge percentage of the tickets that we sell are online as opposed to in person. The amount of in person tickets that we sell where people will come before the day of a show is, count on one hand how many times that happens per quarter. So everything has shifted, but I think it's really important that with things shifting to digital, that everybody finds ways of remaining personal with people. At the Old Courts, for example, we've got an open door policy during the week. You don't need an appointment. Like any good arts venue, you don't have to have an appointment to come into the building and look at some of the surroundings and chat to some of the staff and discover really what your involvement with that place might be. Can't think of anything more intimidating than an arts centre with these, especially a building like ours. It's got these big 120-year-old oak doors where they're shut and you have to knock on them or email for an appointment. That's a non-starter, isn't it? So digital, yes, but we've got to people like people, don't they? You've got to still be approachable and as human as you can.
Well, let's look forward and hope that at some point in 2021, you'll be able to open your venues. Look, putting your artistic director's head on. Tell us a bit about that role. How do you decide what to put on, and how do you decide which venue to put that particular thing on? Take us through that process, please.
So my job as artistic director, in essence, is, I suppose, I have to assess our community, our audiences, our venue spaces, and like the cultural and socio-economic sensibilities of the area where we are. And then I sort of try and imagine a better, more exciting, more innovational, happier, more inclusive version of it. And then, so if we've got where we are now, where would be amazing to go to, what can our organisation do in between? What does that journey actually look like? So, that'll involve forging links with community groups. It'll involve programming artists. It'll involve being really careful about the language that we use as an arts organisation. So if we use a load of acronyms and a load of jargon on everything we do, then some people will go, oh, brilliant, they are a member of this, or and they'll think, oh, I'm really clever, I understand these, or I know what these are. But the fact is that doesn't resonate with the vast majority of people. You've got to just be as normal as you possibly can, be approachable, and then make sure that every month, every 3 months, we're looking at, are we still going in the right direction where we want to be? So a big thing in Wigan for us is inclusion and opportunity for artists. So we're working on we're a part of a national theatre network called the Collaborative Touring Network, which is, we've got partners in Battersea, Medway, Peterborough, all around the UK. And the idea behind the likes of that is bringing quality work, not just to a different location, but that resonates with a location. So when we first opened the Old Courts, the perception locally was that theatre wasn't necessarily for the masses. Music was, but theatre wasn't. So that's a real barrier to inclusion in Wigan. So, one of my things as artistic director now is to think, how do we change that perception with theatre? So, we've got to be clever with the shows that we programme, and we've got to present opportunities.
Why do you think that is? I hate to sound 20th century in this comment, but if you go to London, theatre is very, very popular, probably the most popular city in Britain for it. Is it a class thing? Is it because Wigan is traditionally seen as a northern working class town? Do you think that's part of this attitude?
100%, yeah. So, the theatre, yeah, it's so prevalent in London, and it's incredible. It's magical. There's a load of it. But I'm not speaking on behalf of the people of Wigan, but I'm a Wiganer. I live in Wigan. I always have done. My personal experience is that's there. That doesn't represent us here. So I think that way of thinking has festered for decades now, and then gets to the point where people think that theatre isn't something that they relate to in any way. So that's a really good example of something that we're trying to change by changing the type of theatre that we bring to Wigan. Probably virtually no point whatsoever bringing Shakespeare to the Old Courts. Some people go, brilliant, you've got some Shakespeare on at last, and they come to it. But they are probably people that already go to the theatre a lot. People that probably just classically like Shakespeare. What I'm more interested in is bringing some co-created theatre where we can go down to housing estates in Wigan, literally engage people directly and say, come and tell us a little bit about your story. And if they say I don't like theatre, I'd say, right, okay, I respectfully disagree, because theatre can mean anything. It can mean absolutely anything. It can be any story. It can happen right here on this shopping parade. We're having a conversation. You can still be sat on your BMX and perform if you want. Doesn't matter. There's pretty much no rules to what we can achieve. And then you really catch people off guard when you tell them that there is no right and wrong. And it's the same with, you know, workshops that we have, spoken word artists that come in. They'll perform anywhere, boxing rings, shopping centres, on our stage, in our corridors, on our car park. Doesn't matter. Whatever gets people thinking and people feeling compelled to express themselves, it's fine by me. And I think that's one of the things with the pandemic. Everybody's been affected by it in one way or another. So I think we've got a nation of people who've got something to say now. So it's a great time for us.
Well, while we're talking about theatre, a lot of the students here today are theatre students, and we've got a question from one of them, from Rachel, which kind of follows on quite nicely from what you've been talking. Rachel, have you got your question for Jonny, please?
Yeah. Hi, Jonny. Thank you. My question is, do you have any advice for new directors, practitioners who are looking to showcase work or even put on sort of classes where they could sort of build up a reputation in that way? What would be the best way? Is it to sort of showcase the work for an artistic director or a venue producer, or to come in and have a meeting and things like that?
Yeah, cool. So I would say, I personally, as an artistic director, I am always really keen to see new work, to meet new people. But I think for me, the first port of call would be to find an arts organisation that makes sense to you. So not just in terms of you know, what they stand for or the type of work they put on. Be really practical. Somewhere that, you know, if they go, this is amazing, Rachel, absolutely love it, can you come in all the time, or, you know, come and shadow us, or whatever it is, you know, they give you a really good in. Can you get there easily? Is it practical? There's no point, you know, if you live in the Outer Hebrides, there's no point looking for a placement on the South Coast if you're going to have to commute. So make it practical. So, you know, when you're in control of these things, take the stresses out of it. But, you know, go to an arts organisation the way you've just asked that question, really, where you sort of say, this is what I'm trying to achieve. I'm open to suggestion, and can we have a conversation? And in my experience, I've never found anyone in an arts organisation who isn't receptive to somebody just giving a polite approach to the possibilities. And the fact is, they might go, this is uncanny, we've literally just put a call out for someone like you. Or they might go, this is really bad timing, actually. We've no space for this whatsoever, we've no time because we're doing this huge project, but you should speak to such and such, and they'll put you in touch with somebody who knows somebody, or they might be the person. So approach people, ask the questions, and I suppose be specific about what is useful to you and what isn't useful. Somebody might get the wrong end of the stick, and, you know, don't be so polite that you think, oh, that's not actually going to help me, because it's dead important that you're making progress all the time and you keep that momentum going.
Oh, thank you. That's great.
Yeah, so it sounds to me, thank you, Rachel. It sounds to me, Jonny, that you are very approachable. I mean, you've said this. You mentioned there, you know, if someone comes to you and it's not a good time, you'll suggest going somewhere else. When we do get back to normal, is there not a concern that there's so many productions or performers or performances or exhibitions just chomping at the bit, ready to go, that you might not be able to cater for everything? Is that a good thing, though, because it might lead to an expansion of the sector? What's your thoughts there?
I think it's a good thing because people are really keen to get cracking with ideas and projects. I think it's really good because I think activity like that will flood social media, and it just, anything that promotes our sector for me is a really good thing. But what I would say is, I think there's possibly going to be people who are so desperate to either begin, you know, R&D on a piece of work that they've not been able to do so far, or, you know, with some people to pick back up on something that they had to shelve because of last year. But it's, as keen as people are, it's really important that people don't rush things. it's not a sprint to get, to be the first person back on stage, and just, people have got to make the right decisions, haven't they, about, does this piece of work still actually represent me? Is it still represent what, is it still, and just take stock, really, like people do when people are first devising an idea. Take stock, and just, I think it'll be great for us, because we will have so many people who want to get in touch with us and want to come here and work. We've just got to be creative. Ultimately, we've got a finite amount of square footage in terms of spaces that we can offer people. So what do we do then if we need more space? Go to community centres, go to other arts organisations, and use it as a networking tool.
Networking, that's another very important concept I try to get across to my students. Talking of square footage, just quickly tell us about the Royal Court Theatre. I mean, as people may know, I'm a patron of your events, and I'm very much looking forward to, getting to work later this year. But you showed me and some other patrons around the Royal Court, and it was a shell. This was like in the summer. It was a shell. It was being renovated from the inside. What's the latest on that, and when's that expected to open? And tell us a bit about the history of the Royal Court as well.
Well, so basically, the Royal Court Theatre is on King Street, which is one of the main streets, about a minute's walk from where I am at the Old Courts. So King Street originally, in Wigan Town Centre, at one time there were, I think it's 11 or 12 working theatres many moons ago. So those buildings have either been mothballed or turned into something else. But the Royal Court Theatre was a nightclub most recently, but it hadn't had a great deal of money spent on it to make it a nightclub, which was great. There was still a lot of original features, so we were aware of that building, and we asked to look around it, just being nosy, really. And we got a phone call from a estate agent saying, "Are you still interested in it?" We're like, hypothetically, yeah. And they said this was on a Monday. They said it's going to auction. It's been. So it was going to a property auction. I said when, and he said Wednesday, like 2 days later. So the property auction, we went along. It was at Bolton Stadium. We went along just thinking, oh, what on earth are we doing? But we thought, if it goes for a price that was affordable to us, we'll go for it, because we did have a plan for our space. It just wasn't at that time, if that makes sense. So we got the building. And we're now, as you say, in the process of refurbing that, taking it basically back to as close as we can to what it was originally. So we've stripped it all out, uncovered the original seating, the original proscenium, the original dome on the ceiling. So as you've seen, Graeme, it is an amazing space. So what we've done since you've been is a lot of really, really boring work. So it's been about getting builders on the roof, just looking at the basically the fabric of the building to see what needs to be, or what extra needs to be spent on it to preserve the features, to make it safe. As amazing as the building is, everything was different when that was built. So we've just got to make sure that it's totally up to regulation to be enjoyed. So in terms of when that will open, we are hoping about sort of 15, 16 months from now, we will be open.
Wow.
It may be a bit sooner, it may be a little bit later than that, depending on basically what the world will allow us to do. But it will happen, and the plan is for that to bring large scale theatre, large scale musical shows, people like yourself, Graeme, bands, and aside from these big shows of sort of 800 to 1500 cap, we're looking at the best possible way in making the space accessible to communities. There's a massive scene for dance schools in Wigan, and we want these to have their annual shows and stuff in our spaces. So a lot to think about, but it's well underway.
Oh well, so hopefully you'll open when there's a backlog of creative talent and performances and exhibitions with nowhere to go, and you'll go, here we are, and then we can get. I'm very much looking forward to coming to do something there, because I think it's an incredible venue. Well, just the last few questions. What are there any events you've been part of that just didn't work out and were disastrous, but you learned from it? And also, what are you most proud of in your in the past like 20 years of being a creative director?
So, okay, so we'll go with the difficult first section of the question. So an event that didn't work out as well as it would have been planned has got to be our very first event that we did at the Old Courts. So we had Ian Skelly from the Coral and Dave McCabe from the Zootons who came. So we, friends of mine, a band who split up now, they're called the Suzukis. They were signed to Delta Sonic Records in Liverpool, so that was our into that scene really. So through them we got a contact with Ian Skelly from the Coral, Dave McCabe from the Zootons. They came to our first ever gig, put it online. It was pay on the door. We thought if 50 people turn up, then brilliant. 340 people, I think it was, turned up, which was fine in terms of capacity, but it was just mayhem from thinking we know a lot about how to run events to just, wow, this is like we were learning in real time the do's and don'ts of running at that time a music venue as opposed to an arts centre. But the gig happened. The sound was awful. It was crazy. It was a bit shambolic, but it happened. And the artists were so nice to us and so kind and so sympathetic to the fact that it was our first ever gig. And they came back and did another gig, and they had better sound. The event was smoother. It was a better experience. And us as the people sort of running the venue, we were able to enjoy it on the night rather than weeks and weeks after when our blood pressure would come down. So that's an example. It doesn't go
so you learned from it and made sure that it didn't happen again. That's great. And what are you most proud of?
Honestly, there's a lot of things we're most proud of, but in terms of speaking about the bigger picture, the fact that we're still here, sort of 7 years in, the fact that we've got an amazing team of genuinely talented staff. I'm not saying that because they might watch this. I'm saying that because they are. They really are. But I think highlights, there's a couple stick out for me personally. When we had Sugar Hill Gang came and played, that was incredible. And that was just to see the reaction from the crowd of Wiganers for the Sugar Hill Gang. That was amazing. Sir Ian McKellen performing a one-man show in our studio theatre on site here at the Old Courts. That was obviously really special and very surreal at the same time. But I think the thing I'm proudest of, if I had to just pin it down to one thing, it wouldn't be anything we've programmed. It's some of the things we hear from audience and from various stakeholders who get in touch and say, we're glad that this is happening and we're proud of the Old Courts and we're happy that it's here in Wigan and how can we support it. So just the inkling that we are changing that perception that an arts centre won't work in Wigan, can't work in Wigan. There's a reason why people haven't done this before. Well, we disagree with that, and it feels like that's tipping now, and there's more people starting to believe that this is valuable and people buying into it, and that fills me with confidence that long after I've gone and done whatever I'm doing elsewhere and look after me 3 kids, or they look after me, that this will still be going. It'll be better than we ever could make it because someone else has taken it on and pushed it to the next level.
Brilliant. Well, listen, long may it continue. As I said earlier, very much looking forward to working with you later this year and in the future. Jonny Davenport, thank you very much for joining us for this Creative Futures session. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.